Folks, welcome back. As I said last time, my name is Kevin Roberts. I'm the Curriculum Manager at Antrec Limited, and we're going to continue with our Level 2 certificate in the introduction to the role of the professional taxi and private hire driver. Now, this is Unit 2 that we're going to be doing, folks. So it's road safety when driving passengers in a taxi or private hire vehicle. And again, like we said on the previous unit, I need you to use the link that you've been sent through. Go online, find the Unit 2 workbook, which I'll use alongside this presentation, and you can make some notes in it, gain a bit of extra information, etc. There's a couple of activities as well, so it would be useful if you were using that alongside it. Now, you can see in the previous unit, we covered health and safety. This unit's all about road safety. So from the 2 learning outcomes in front of you, you can see that we're going to look at different factors that affect the driver's judgment and concentration. So, it's going to involve looking into your physical fitness, your medical, your medicals that you have to have carried out. And then we're going to, be looking again at seatbelt legislation, covering that type of stuff. And then we are going to go into learn outcome 2, which is know how to transport customers in a safe and comfortable manner. Now, straight away, safe and comfortable manner, that is really important to us. And it will kind of flow through the whole presentation, because that's a condition of your job as a private hire or as a taxi driver, to ensure that the customer is transported in a safe and comfortable manner. Right. So if we move forward into the first slide, there's a question on there about being physically and mentally fit to drive, and I ask you why this is important. So if you think about it, folks, to get on the road, you're going to have your medical, you're going to have your DBS check, you're going to have to pass your knowledge test and other criteria, etc. And the reason behind all these things is public safety. Yeah, you're going to be accessing the public, you're going to be, transporting them from A to B. You've got to ensure that, one, you are fit to drive, yet you can be out there medically fit. 2, physically fit, you've got to make those decisions yourself and ensure that if you were to use self-medication, anything like that, that you are actually okay to go out there and work. But also that you understand the legislation that we've discussed previously, so that you're showing that duty of care, so that you're compliant with the rules, so that you're not getting yourself into trouble or putting yourself in danger or anybody else in danger. Okay, so some good pointers there, and you can see there's a space for making your notes on page 2 of your workbook. So I'll give you a second, you can actually look over that and start to make those notes. Okay, in order to make those notes, folks, you might just have to press pause on your presentation to take that time. But yeah, I'm going to move on. So you can see, in terms of being physically and mentally fit to drive, when I refer to medical fitness, I'm talking about your Group 2 medical, what you're going to do with a registered professional. Okay, so different councils under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act will request that you do different things. So for instance, one council may state that you have to use your own GP or somebody registered at your surgery, whereas another council might have their own GP, or they might have a nominated 4 or 5 that you use. So that comes under, like I mentioned, the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions, which we've talked about a few times. Now, in terms of this medical assessment, it's a Group 2, as I said, and generally what you find is that you need one every 10 years up to the age of 45. Then once you hit 45, it's every 5 years to the age of 65. Okay, once you hit 65, every year, and every medical that you do involves that eyesight test, the Snellen's test that we talked about, where you cover one eye and you stand so far away from the board. Okay, now I've mentioned it already. That's the general consensus, that it's every 5 years between the ages of 45 and 65. But obviously, like I keep on mentioning, the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, they have the power to put in what conditions suits their local needs. So, it's actually according to local bylaws how often that you get those medicals in those time frames. So you may be sitting there thinking, well, why do you have to get medicals more often as you're getting older? And to be honest with you, it's the same as a vehicle. The older a vehicle gets, the more often it needs service, and the more often it needs checking, the more often it needs its compliance test, because the vehicle is showing signs of wear and tear. It's aged. It's basically getting ready for the scrap heap in the nicest possible sense. And us as humans, as people, the older we get, obviously we take on board more ailments. We get past our peak. Our eyesight might start to wane a little bit. We might go a little bit short on top. Might get a little tire around the midsection. That all comes on as you're getting older. And yeah, obviously, if you're going to pick up any of these physical conditions, that's likely to happen as you get older, your eyesight and stuff. So that's why you have to have more regular medicals as you're getting older, folks. Okay. So like I said, it's a Group 2 medical, and you can see from the list on screen, there's a range of different criteria that they'll check you for. Now, when I'm delivering, often the ones that people highlight for me, they'll often highlight diabetes, they'll highlight epilepsy as another one, as common conditions that people live with. Now, if you're currently driving, if you've currently got your license, you've got your category B on that license, then as long as you're able to drive at the minute, if you're living with epilepsy or diabetes, then there should be no reason why you shouldn't be able to be a taxi or private hire driver. But that is why the medical practitioner makes that decision. They determine how you're managing your diabetes. They determine your last seizure if you're living with epilepsy, because obviously, if you're behind the wheel of a car and you have a seizure, then you can imagine the consequences of that. So that's for the medical practitioner to make that decision. A few of the things that you can see on the screen, we've got on here, let me see, psychiatric disorders. Now, I have had situations on the programme where learners have come to me and told me that they've been diagnosed with a split personality disorder, schizophrenia. So my advice to them has always been to, speak to the doctor, see what the situation is. And if I'm honest with you, some of these learners have been passed on the medical and some of them have failed the medical. And again, that's for the medical practitioner to determine whether it's the right thing to put you in that environment, okay? As we look down the list, you can see on there, it's got a little bit about drug and alcohol misuse and dependency. Now, the doctor has the right to do a drug test on you to see if there's any dependency there. Again, you can understand the reasoning for that. If you're going to be working on the road, if you're going to be operating this vehicle and the doctor believes that you've got dependency on alcohol or drugs, then they're going to make that decision based on that. Any other areas that you're looking at and thinking that you're not sure what they are, neurological disorders, renal disorders, jump on Google, have a little search, just find out what that terminology is, and you'll be able to find that criteria and see if it applies to you. Now, I'm just going to jump back a slide, folks, because I jumped forward to look at the medical criteria, and you'll see at the bottom, we just done our medical fitness. You can see at the bottom, physical fitness. Okay, so physical fitness, we're talking about fatigue, alcohol, drugs, and the big difference there is that you're making the decision. You're the one who is determining whether you can work or not, because you're going to be self-employed. So the common ailments that are out there, cold, flu, virus, hay fever, asthma, tiredness, these are the type of things where you will make the decision. And like I said previously, you are self-employed, so you may get up one morning, you may feel like you've got flu-like symptoms, a bit of a cold, something like that. You may not feel like working, but often because you're self-employed and you don't get sick pay, etc., people will just get up and get out there and get to work. Now, obviously, if you are driving that vehicle, if you're transporting the public, that can be an issue. And what a lot of us do, we tend to self-medicate. So we go to the pharmacist, the chemist, and we get some over-the-counter drugs to treat the ailments that we're suffering. Now, that's a problem because obviously you could be drowsiness, etc. That's going to have an effect. It could be alter your behaviour. You could get done for drug driving. So we need to consider that. And we do get to that as we go forward. The first thing that I want to look at, folks, is these different conditions that I've got listed here. The cold, the flu, the virus, etc., hay fever, and how they actually affect the driver. So if you're thinking about it, some of the different things that are coming about, okay, you've got impaired concentration, your senses, your judgment, coordination, your reaction time. So the term impairment, I'm talking about when something is stopped from functioning the way it normally functions. Okay, so that impairment, so if your concentration's impaired, means you're not able to focus. And if that's because of a cold or hay fever or something, that lack of focus means that you might not have your eye on the road. You might not be judging things the right way. It might lead to poor decision making. You can see the dangers of that. One that I will pick up at the bottom of the screen is reaction times. It's important that we understand, guys, that the term increased reaction time, that is a negative thing, okay? Increased reaction time, it's negative. Okay? If we improve our reaction time, that will be positive. Yeah, because an improved reaction time is a shortened reaction time. Yeah, it lessens it. It's based on time, remember. So an increased reaction time means it takes you longer to react. And if it's taking you longer to react, then you're more likely to have a collision. Yeah, so that following distance is really important from the vehicle in front. Now, I've mentioned these situations. You'll be self-employed. You'll head over to the chemist or the pharmacy, and you'll get some over-the-counter drugs, yeah, to treat that situation. Now, it's worth noting here that the perfect person to actually speak to is the pharmacist, better than the GP, because the pharmacist understands the makeup of these drugs and what these concoctions, what effect that they'll have on you as a person. They know, what can be taken alongside each other, etc. Whereas a GP is there to diagnose and prescribe. And from that prescription, they may get that from a book or whatever. And then once it goes over to the pharmacist deals with the makeup of it. Okay, but again, like we did on the last slide, it's important that we consider the effects of these different drugs. Okay, so you can see the list I've just given you there, 8 and 9 points, talking about the different effects that drugs will have on you as you drive. So have a little glance down that, and you'll see that they're also listed in your Unit 2 workbook. Okay, on page 2, going into page 3. So as you can see on there, any of those conditions are negative for the taxi or private hire driver. And if you were using over-the-counter medicines and you hadn't read the label correctly or you hadn't spoken to the pharmacist, then you would be classed, you'd be breaking the Road Traffic Act, yeah? 1988, you would be, you'd be drug driving, you'd be intoxicated, you'd be driving under the influence of drugs. That would go on your record, you'd be charged for that. So obviously, you're going to be a professional driver. We don't need that situation. As we look down this list, drowsiness, reduced awareness, making it hard to concentrate, coordination problems, behavior altering. Remember, it's a drug. The drugs change the way our bodies work. They'll change your hormone levels, change the way you think. Yeah, that's what they're there for. So they're going to alter your behavior. Now, you don't want to be having your behavior altered when you're in this situation where you're dealing with the public. Yeah, so you leave yourself vulnerable. So it's important that we get that advice from the pharmacist. So moving from the prescribed drugs and speaking to the pharmacist, we need to consider the effects of alcohol and drugs, so more recreational drugs on your ability to drive. Now, there is a large influx of the amount of drivers that are being pulled over roadside in recent years and being charged with drunk driving as well as drug driving. Okay, especially taxi drivers. So it's something that needs to be at the forefront of your mind. If you're not working a Saturday night and you're out with friends or you're out at a party or something, you've had a couple of drinks, you've got to consider the fact that you may well still be over the limit the following day if you want to go out, say, on the Sunday. You say on average the liver can get through around about 1 unit of alcohol per hour for the average person, but obviously different genders, different physical makeup, what you've eaten, what you've drank, etc. They all have an effect on it, so, take that rule as with a pinch of salt, if you like. There's only one safe level of alcohol that you can go out and drive with. So all these units, etc., out there that are allowed, the safest level of alcohol that you can consume and go out and drive is no alcohol. Simple as that. Because the second that you start drinking alcohol, it's going to have an impact on you, whether it makes you more of a risk taker, whether it affects your coordination, your judgment, alters your behavior, whatever it is. And the same with drugs as well. Okay. So in terms of what we've got, again, we've got a list of different situations here, the way it manifests itself both physically and mentally for you as a driver. And you can see the situations on there are not good if you've got members of the public in your vehicle. Yeah. So as we look down the list, even things like aggressiveness, over familiarity, inappropriate behavior, they're not necessarily the ones that you think of initially, but because the behavior altering, you end up getting yourself into trouble. That goes alongside the risk taking, the slow reactions, the coordination impact, the vision impact. Okay. So, like I said, safest way, no alcohol, obviously no drugs. And you've seen some of the effects right there, guys. Right, so there's actually other influences on your judgment and concentration. I know we've done alcohol, we've done drugs, we've talked about our medical situation and our physical fitness. what we've got here is a list of different situations that will have an impact on you as a driver. And I'm looking at page 5 of the Unit 2 workbook here. And you can see there's 6 of them listed that are picked out as key. Some of them more obvious than others. Okay, so if I pick out, if I pick out meeting unrealistic time schedules, on there, then that ties in really well with stress. Yeah, if you're out there in your vehicle and you're trying to get somewhere and you've got a deadline to meet, you're running late, you're going to get stressed out. What tends to happen is you start to speed. Okay, you start to make poor decisions, so you'll go around that corner in third gear rather than second gear. Okay, you'll brake late and you'll brake harsh. You'll over accelerate. You may run the amber light instead of a red light. Okay, and all these things are making you more vulnerable. They're making you more unsafe, and you end up getting, getting charged. You'll find points on your license. Could cause injury. Could cause death. So basically, what you're doing is you're being negligent. Yeah, because your judgment and concentration has been affected by the fact that you're stressed out because you're running late. So in those situations, you've just got to establish your priorities. If you're running late, let the operator know so they can let the customer know. They may even pass the job on to another person, and you'll get there when you get there. There's nothing else that you can do about it. Best arriving safe than never at all, as they say. Heavy traffic volumes and weather conditions. Obviously, you can see the reasoning behind why they would affect your judgment and your concentration. The weather conditions, it's difficult to focus, it's difficult to see, the traffic volumes, boredom, stress, hostile environment with your customer. But the big one for me that I will pick up on going through that is parking. People often don't realise with the parking how that affects your judgment and concentration. And the example I'm going to give is this gentleman up here. Okay, he's parked conveniently outside the school on the zigzags. Okay, no respect for anybody, selfish, doesn't care the fact that you're trying to drop your kids off as well and you're also in a rush. And what happens here with this inconsiderate parking, we tend to lose our cool, we tend to lose our rag and get annoyed with these people. And then as you drive past them, you tend to stare them down, have a look at them, or, you'll have a little go, you'll shake your head, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. What you've done is you've been distracted by that driver. You've become frustrated, you've become stressed, you've become distracted. And the one thing that you're not doing is watching the road and showing a duty of care. Now, if you think you're outside the school entrance at, 9 o'clock in the morning, just as school's about to start, or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's about to let out, you're not concentrating on the road, and you've got young people crossing the road, really busy area. You're too busy having a go with the driver. Before you know it, you've caused an accident and you're the one to blame because you haven't shown your duty of care. So always bearing that in mind to be professional and to be the person who does their job and carries out their duty responsibly. That's why you're doing this training. That's why you're doing your DBS check. That's why you're going through all of this, folks, to be out there and make sure that you show your due diligence. Okay, so that brings us through to seatbelt legislation. Now, obviously, you've already completed Unit 1, and I've already talked about this, but like I said in the earlier unit, if there's something that you're going to take from this, one of the most important things is the seatbelt legislation. So we'll quickly go over it again, we'll recap it, we'll make sure you've got that idea. So I'm looking at page 6 of your Unit 2 workbook, that's where we want to be. Okay, and you can see, as we go from page 6 down onto page 7, you can see the table that I talked about, which compares the different categories for this seatbelt legislation. Now, as mentioned yesterday, both taxi drivers and private hire drivers, the law is on their side, the legislation protects them, and they are allowed to remove their seatbelt in certain situations. Now, my advice would be to wear it at all. That's the obvious advice for me, always wear your seatbelt. But due to different scenarios that can present themselves, emergency situations, you are allowed to remove your seatbelt. So for a Hackney driver, private hire, a Hackney driver, they can remove their seatbelt when they've got their light on, so when they're applying for hire, when they've got the for hire light on, or when they're out on the street, and they can also remove their seatbelt when they've got to pay and fare a customer who's in their vehicle. Okay, 2 situations when they can remove their seatbelt, and that's because if there's an emergency evacuation required where you need to support the customer, or for your own safety, because there's been situations where drivers have been pinned to the seat, as we mentioned in the earlier unit. For private hire drivers, there's one situation when you can remove your seatbelt, and that is when you have a fare paying customer in your vehicle. It's the only time. And again, for the same reasons, for emergency situations such as supporting a customer or if you're under threat. Okay, good. So in terms of passengers, obviously you advise all passengers to wear their seatbelt. That's your duty of care to them. Some of them you take responsibility for, some of them will take their own responsibility, but you still have that duty of care for them. And as we work through, we're going to look at a few of them in the table. So the drivers we know about, okay, so we can move on from that. And we'll start with children under the age of 3 years, okay? So like I said previously, in the front seat, as we can see there, the front seat, correct child restraint must be used. By child restraint, I mean car seat, okay? It's got to be the correct one. If they're in the front seat, remember, switch those airbags off. That's really important, okay? But more so for the private hire driver, it's important to know that children under the age of 3 can travel in the front of your vehicle. Ideally, you'd want them to be in the rear of the vehicle. You'd be better suited with them there. And what you get, again, correct child restraint must be used. But obviously, as we talked about, you can't carry around car seats with you. You won't have the space. You know, you've got to leave that space free for luggage and stuff like that, prams. Obviously, parents can't carry a car seat around with them either. So, as you can see here, in the rear seat of a private hire vehicle, if you've got no child restraint, then that child can travel in a taxi or private hire. They can travel unrestrained, and it's called babes in arms. Okay? And what we have with babes in arms, that is what I discussed yesterday, where you've got a responsible adult is sitting in the rear of the vehicle. That responsible adult will put their seatbelt on, okay? They'll take their child under the age of 3, sit them on the lap, and they will hold on to that child, yeah? And that's deemed to be the safest way to do it, because the adult, in the case of an emergency stop, the adult will be held into their seat by the seatbelt, and the child will be held by the adult. So that's the best situation that you've got. Your responsibility, folks. You're the driver. It's on you to make sure that they're doing that, okay? So even if the parent decides to take the belt off, that's still your responsibility. So moving it forward, once you've hit the age of 3, until they get to their 12th birthday or 1.35 meters in height, remember that 1.35 meters, what I told you is if you're sitting behind your steering wheel and that customer is shorter than you, that's what I judge it by, okay, that 1.35 meters. But from the age of 3 to 12, again, they can sit in the front, and what they have this time, child restraints needed for them, okay, so they can sit in the front. Obviously, they can sit in the back, and again, correct child restraint must be used, ideally, that's what you're after. Obviously, like I said previously, you can't carry car seats around with you, so what we have from the age of 3 to 12, yeah, or 1.35 meters in height, there's 3 situations, which you can see right here, I'm highlighting them, those 3 situations where these children can travel without a child restraint and with an adult seatbelt, okay? So number 1, in a taxi or private hire vehicle. Number 2, the short distance journeys of unexpected necessity. And number 3, when you've got 2 car seats, left and right in the back, and there's no space for the 3rd car seat in the middle, which means that the oldest child would sit in the middle with an adult seatbelt, and that is seen as the safest way to do it, okay? I'm just recapping for you guys. Important that we realise that's the driver's responsibility, okay? Up to the driver to make sure that this is happening. Right. So moving it forward, we've got our last 2 categories here. You can see children between the age of 12 and 13, okay? They're over 1.35 meters, okay? You can see in the front seat, they're allowed to sit there. In the back seat, they're allowed to sit there. And in neither situation do they need a child seat, a child restraint. They can just use an adult seatbelt. That is because they're physically mature enough and they're tall enough, which either or. So it's either internal organs are going to stand up against an emergency stop, or they're tall enough so they're not going to slip under that lap belt as they go. The key to this category, folks, the 12 to 13-year-olds, is that it's the driver's responsibility. And then what you can see, once the child hits 14 years, they're legally classed as an adult under the seatbelt regulations, okay? Which means they can wear an adult seatbelt in the front, wear an adult seatbelt in the rear of the vehicle, no child restraint required. But the interesting thing is, look who takes responsibility, the passenger. Okay, it's their responsibility. Now, you still have a duty of care, but it's their responsibility should you get pulled. So, different scenarios and situations that present themselves. From my own experience, customers will kind of argue with you because they don't want to wear seatbelts. Personally, I don't understand why, but I'm pretty certain that some of the people that I'm speaking to out there, you guys don't wear seatbelts, but I'm not here to discuss that. You know, seatbelts are there for your own safety. You know, if you get the data on, you know, injuries or deaths caused because seatbelts aren't being worn, I know that that'll really hit it home to why we need those seatbelts. But what you might get a child who gets in who you're not sure whether they should wear a seatbelt or not. So you ask them and they respond by saying, I don't want to wear a seatbelt, my mum and dad don't make me wear a seatbelt. And then you say, but you need to wear a seatbelt, that's the law. And they say, well, what does the law say? And you say, I'm responsible for you wearing a seatbelt till you hit the age of 14. And then they'll turn around to you and say, well, I'm 15. Yeah, and they'll lie so you don't have to wear it. In that situation, if you were to be pulled over and they lied to you and told you they were 15 when actually they were 13, then you're still responsible as the driver, because only at the age of 14, remember, are they deemed mature enough to understand the consequences of that lie and understand the right and wrong. So yeah, my tip to you, don't mention age. Don't go near age with these passengers. Ask them to wear a seatbelt. If you've got anything against wearing a seatbelt, you tell them that there's a local agenda where the police are pulling drivers over and they're checking on it. If they don't wear their seatbelt, you're not allowed to drive. It's up to them then, okay? And they can make that decision if they want to do the journey. So as we move this forward, I've got one more category for seatbelt legislation, and the pictures to say everything that are on screen there. So it's wearing a seatbelt during pregnancy, folks. And we're down now, we are onto page 8 of your Unit 2 workbook, okay? So these images show you exactly why you need to be aware of seatbelts during pregnancy, because as a driver, remember, you have a duty of care to your customer and anybody under the age of 14. Now, in this situation here, you can see that child is at risk if you were to do an emergency stop. Yeah, the trauma on that child, the consequences, you know, you wouldn't even want to consider, and you wouldn't want to be responsible for that. So what you need to advise if you have a pregnant lady in your vehicle is this situation, okay? The criteria for how they wear their seatbelt. So you can see as we go up on here, the diagonal strap between the breasts, over the breastbone, and not into the neck, it's on the shoulder, okay? The key one is the lap belt will go underneath the bump, yeah, and on top of the thighs, and the belt should still be as tight as possible, okay? What you want is the physical trauma of the emergency stop needs to go into the adult's frame, their body frame, okay, not into the child, okay, because obviously you can imagine the consequences. Don't even want to consider them. You don't want to be responsible for that. So in this situation, it's up to you. You have that duty of care to advise and make sure that you're looking out for that unborn child. Now, in this situation, obviously, you're responsible for all customers. You have a duty of care for all of them. But over the age of 14, people take responsibility for themselves. And let's be serious. You could have a girl who's pregnant who's under the age of 14. So they would be your responsibility. That is on you. So you need to make sure that you're enforcing that and asserting that authority in that situation. Now, there is situations where pregnant ladies can travel without a seatbelt. There is, preeclampsia, for instance, when they have high blood pressure during pregnancy, preeclampsia. So in that situation, if they chose not to wear their seatbelt, they would need to have a medical exemption, and they need to have it with them if you were pulled over, okay? Otherwise, they'd be getting charged, okay? They're breaking the law there. Now, on page 9 of your workbook, on Unit 2 workbook, there's a question on there asking about duty of care and adaptations that can be made. So if we consider both the pregnant customer as well as any other customer, think of how you can adapt your service to make sure that that customer has a safe, comfortable journey. Make some notes on that now. You might want to pause the presentation and do that and make those notes. But as you're looking into it, the types of examples that you want to give, you can adjust your driving style. Yeah, you can consider the route that you're taking. You can adjust where your seats are, etc., to give them more space. Make sure you're not over accelerating, harsh braking. Consider how you're taking corners, etc., etc. Holding doors when they're getting in. That safe, comfortable journey is crucial, and it's one of the conditions of your role, guys. So to continue with that, those adaptations and that safe, comfortable journey, what you've got in front of you here, this situation on the image, you can see there's a pothole, there's a warning sign, it's a single lane. So, you've got to consider there the type of things that you could do to adjust to that situation. The obvious one that should be jumping out to you, the obvious one that should be jumping out to you is that you take your foot off that accelerator, you slow down, you give yourself time to think. You might have to adjust your position on the road. You might have to let other drivers know what's going on. So, these types of things here, you can see using your lights and your ancillary equipment. Ancillary equipment are the things you've got to support you as a driver. So it might be your hazard lights, your indicators, your brake lights. That's ancillary equipment that support you in your role, okay? But yeah, you've got to consider your defensive driving techniques there. You've got to give people time to react behind you. You've got to do the predictable things. And as we go through this defensive driving and adapting the way you go about it, I think predictability is key as you're out there driving. If you're predictable, people know what you're going to do. And if you think about it, any time that you've ever had a near miss or even an incident or an accident, anything's happened, that often comes because of the unpredictability of the other driver or the unpredictability of you. Yeah, when people do things that you're not expecting to do, that's when it shocks you. That's when accidents happen. If people just follow the highway code, follow the rules of the road, whatever's going on, then that predictability should mean that there's less situations. Okay. So in considering defensive driving, you can see I put up 6 bullet points there, guys. And it's as simple as anticipation, staying in control, that duty of care, being alert at all times. When you're driving, where should you be looking? Yeah, you've got your mirrors, which are a key safety feature if used correctly. Yeah, your mirrors will always let you know you've got a left lane, you've got a right lane that you can pull into if needs be, and also tells you if somebody's tailgating or coming up behind you and you need to get out the way. But as well as those mirrors being your key safety feature, you should be scanning the horizon. You should be seeing what's going on ahead of you, left and right, looking out for flashing lights, workers in the road, traffic, anything like that. So you can commit, you can change lane, you can make your decision early, you can be predictable. Yeah, you can let other people know what's going on. Flying up the outside lane to try to get to the front of the queue. If somebody's following you behind and they don't know that those workers are in the road, then suddenly you cut in. They're going to be presented with that unpredictability, then they're going to have to slam on, etc. Whereas if you get across early, everyone else can see what's going on. They can make their decision based on that. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So as part of your defensive driving, I'm going to refer you to page 9, the bottom of page 9 of your Unit 2 workbook, folks. And you'll see on there, we've got one of the acronyms that we talked about, remember, a word made up with the first letter of other words, just a useful way to remember things, okay? And when we talk about defensive driving, we have something called the tug method, the tug technique, and you can see it there. So you may want to fill this in as you go, but the T, like I've already mentioned, the T stands for taking in information. So as you're scanning the horizon and you're taking all those hazards, you're doing your hazard perception, you're taking in that information, absorbing it. So what that can do for you, it can help you plan a response. So you use that information. So we take it in and then we use that information to plan our response. Once we've planned our response and we commit to doing it, we've got to give that information to other drivers. And that might be with our ancillary equipment, which is what I mentioned previously. Your brake lights, your hazard lights, your indicators, anything like that, you're letting people know. Even pulling out early, as I said, if you've got a parked car, don't wait till you're right on top of that car and then suddenly pull out, because that's unpredictable for the driver behind. We might not be able to see beyond you. If you can commit early, indicate, check your position, get across, then the other driver gets to see in front. They can see that hazard and they can get across as well. So predictability is key when we're talking about defensive driving, guys. Yeah. Now, in terms of that predictability and unpredictability that I've mentioned, what you've got to realise is that you're going to go out there and be a taxi or a private hire driver. And that comes with its own stigma. I mentioned it in the previous unit. A lot of drivers on the road don't like taxi drivers because past experiences, drivers will pull up at any time, they'll block the road, they don't use the hazard lights, the indicators correctly, and they cause a hazard. Okay, so you're going to experience that. People don't necessarily like you being on the road, but what you've got to do is make sure that you're doing it right. Okay, because you will get a little bit of animosity towards you, especially if you're just pulling over and stopping with no indicator or hazard lights, etc. So what we've got here on page 11, you can see the same graphic that you can see on screen, and there's a box with the technique that you follow. It's jumbled up and you've got to put them in the right order. So pause this presentation, please have a little look at the mirror, position, look, speed, signal that you can see in front of you, and try and put them in the right order for me. But as I said, pause it first and do it. Okay, if you paused and you had to go, hopefully what you've come up with is the technique that's shown on screen. Mirror, signal, and then the maneuver is made up of position, speed, look. So mirror signal is always first. We've got that. Yeah, check your mirrors, key safety feature. What's behind you? What's in the left lane? What's in the right lane? Signal, be predictable. Let the person know where you're going. And then it's all about adapting your position on the road, making sure we adjust our speed, and then we do our final checks, blind spot, or we look in the road ahead as we're going. So you think about progressing on a roundabout. Yeah, how many times have you got your position early on the roundabout? You're turning right at the roundabout, and you get into the right-hand lane, and you've got people who are also turning right within the left-hand lane, and they're coming right round the front of you. Okay, if there's a driver who wants to go straight through that roundabout and you're in the wrong lane, as you come round, obviously that's what you get, that collision there. So it's about getting in position. It's about letting people know where you're going. It's about being predictable for them. If you're struggling with the mirror position speed, mirror signal position speed look, okay, there is a useful link that I've put on the website. So I'll just, as a link back to it here, on the website, you'll see it. It's called Mirror Signal Maneuver. Oh, one moment. It's called Mirror Signal Maneuver Video. So you can get in there, you can have a little look, you can check it out and see what the script is. So watch it, it's 4 to 5 minutes. It explains it all well for you with a video, tells you the best way to approach the mirror signal maneuver technique. So moving on to basically stopping distances. We're going to do a couple of slides around stopping distance, make sure that we understand that. And I don't want to teach you something that you already know, because we've all learned to drive, we all know what we're doing, but it's important that we've got these definitions down. So you can see on page 11 of your workbook, there's a gap to fill in the definitions as we go. It's well worth your while doing this, folks, just to get that understanding and put it back into the forefront of your mind. So first things first, the top bullet point, the safe following distance, the first one. What I'm talking about there, we all know about the 2-second rule. Yeah, only a fool breaks the 2-second rule. We all know about chevrons on the motorway, etc. But what I'm after here is an actual definition to understand what that is and what that means. So your safe following distance, it's talking about the distance between you and the vehicle in front, obviously, that you are following. But yeah, a safe following distance is determined by different things. It's determined by the weather, the road surface, the condition of the vehicle, the brake pads, the tires, etc. So it is an adjustable thing. So the old 2-second rule that we're talking about, only a fool breaks the 2-second rule. In different conditions, that should be adjusted. Yeah, at different speeds. Yeah, it's going to take you longer to stop, etc. So we just got to get our heads around that a little bit. So safe following distance is the distance, the minimum distance required between you and the vehicle in front to ensure that you don't have a collision. That's what we're talking about. Okay, so from there, after the safe following distance, I think the easiest place to start then is the thinking distance. Okay, and if you consider thinking distance, what that's talking about is effectively your reaction time. Okay, so as you're driving along, stimulus is presented in front of you, whether it's brake lights, whether it's a person in the road, that stimulus has been presented. You see that, it goes in, you interpret it, yeah, in your brain, that information processing, yeah, you interpret that, you send a response down your spinal cord, into the muscles, lift your foot off the accelerator, touch the brake pedal, The instant that you touch your brake pedal, that is your thinking distance complete. So when the stimulus has been presented, we interpret it, we touch our brake pedal, that's our reaction time, that's our thinking distance, okay? Normally around about 2/3 of a second for the average person. So think how far you travel in those 2/3 of a second when you're going 70 miles an hour, okay? And it starts to get a little bit concerning, okay? From the thinking distance, we then move on to our braking distance, okay? So if thinking distance stops when we touch the brake pedal, braking distance starts the split second that we touch that brake pedal, okay? And it's timed from touching the brake pedal right the way through to when we bring that vehicle to a standstill, to a stop. That's our braking distance, okay? Touching the brake pedal, stopping the vehicle, determined by, the brake pads, the condition of the tires, the condition of the road, etc. The weather conditions can stop that. Okay, so then we've got stopping distance, our overall stopping distance. And if I move us forward on onto the next slide, you can see which stopping distances, that's what this is, okay? You can see on the stopping distance, the blue makes up the thinking, the red makes up the braking. So thinking plus braking equals stopping distances, yeah? Thinking plus braking equals stopping, and stopping must be less than following, otherwise there's going to be a collision, okay? So thinking plus braking equals stopping, and that must be less than following, otherwise there will be a collision. Sorry for the dodgy formula there, but just to give you the idea. Thinking plus braking equals stopping, stopping must be less than following, otherwise you're getting a rear end collision. Okay, so in this situation, you can see the thinking distances and how they change, yeah? You can see at 40 miles an hour, you need 12 meters worth of thinking distance, okay? And then once you touch that brake pedal, it's 24 meters to bring the car to a halt. That's the braking distance. That would make up a total of 36 meters stopping distance, okay, or 118 feet, okay? So, can be difficult to judge that, and you can see how the different speeds, the increase, especially in the braking distances. Yeah, look at the difference there. You've got 75 meters worth of braking distance at 70 miles an hour compared to 14 meters at 30 miles an hour. Now, this all ties in with the 2-second rule. And if you're unaware of what that 2-second rule is, basically, I mean, there was a big advertising campaign in like the mid-80s, I remember it. And what you had, it was to say that phrase, only a fool breaks the 2-second rule. It takes you around 2 seconds to say it. And say you're driving on the road, on the motorway, say, and the car in front that you're following passes under a landmark, so say passes under a bridge, and you see the shadow of that bridge. At that moment, you should be able to say, only a fool breaks the 2-second rule. And you should be able to get that phrase out before you pass under the same landmark. If you can say that phrase, you're far enough back. If you can't complete the phrase, you're too close and you need to drop back a little bit. Obviously, as times have progressed, we've introduced chevrons, so you stay 2 chevrons apart, which is at 70 miles an hour, those 2 chevrons are giving you that same type of distance. But that's what the 2-second rule is all about. Other rules that are out there that are worth being aware of, you can see on screen, leaving a gap of 1 meter for each mile per hour of speed, okay? 1 meter for every mile per hour. Now, as we look at the graphic, you can see 1 meter for each mile per hour. You can see as we go through, it works up to an extent, okay? But then when you get to 50 miles per hour, it takes 53 meters to stop. So yeah, that's where it can start getting a little bit difficult. 60 miles per hour takes you 73 meters to stop. But that is a rule of thumb that's out there, that you should leave a gap of 1 meter for every mile per hour of speed, okay? And that will tie you in with the 2-second rule. Now, when I'm saying that, that's dry conditions, guys, okay? So obviously, when weather conditions change, everything changes, yeah? And in wet conditions, you should at least double the 2-second rule. So if it starts to rain, it should be a 4-second rule, okay? Only if it breaks the 4-second rule in the rain. If that rain gets particularly bad, if visibility gets poor, etc., then you have to make a judgment. You may need to triple it. It could be a 6-second rule, okay, just to back off a little bit more. Do naturally anyway. But yeah, to show that duty of care, you're carrying the public, yeah, you need to double it, you need to triple it. If you're out in wintry conditions, okay, it might be icy, it might be snowing, etc., then really you want to increase that separation distance more. So you might want to go times 10, 20 seconds back. And as much as that sounds silly, you need to slow down, you need to get back, because I'm sure you've experienced it when you're out and the road surface is a little bit icy or it's been snowing, and your pressure brakes at the roundabout and that ABS kicks in and the car judders and rattles and you glide forward. Pretty scary stuff. And if you've got a customer in the car, that's not good customer service. So you need to be dropping back. You need to be taking into account the 2-second rule and multiplying it for the different weather conditions. Okay. So to move forward, remember, thinking plus braking equals stopping. Stopping distance should be less than following distance. Otherwise, you're risking a rear end collision. And then you've got your 2-second rule, which should be adapted according to the conditions that you're driving in. You could double it, triple it, times 10, and you should take into account the speed that you're going as well. So if we move that forward, folks, into the next slide, other things that affect your stopping distances, if you should be now on page 12 of your workbook, and you've got some information that relates directly to the graphic on screen. But as I look at that graphic, certain things jump out to me that are going to affect my stopping distances. The first thing is the gradient, okay? Yeah, the gradient. If you're going uphill, if you're going downhill, the incline, the decline, okay, that gradient is going to impact on your stopping distances. If you're going downhill, it's going to make it more difficult to stop. If you're going uphill, it actually makes it easier to come to a stop. That's because of gravity, obviously. I don't want to start going into, teaching you about gravity, but yeah, it makes it easier or more difficult to stop. The second thing that I look at here is the weight of the vehicle. On that situation, you're talking about a lorry, a heavy load, heavy vehicle, but you're going to be driving your taxi or your private hire vehicle, and you may have one customer, you may have 4 customers, you may have 4 suitcases. Yeah, your vehicle might be loaded pretty heavy, and that will have an impact on your stopping distance, your ability to bring that vehicle to a halt, okay? Another thing that affects our stopping distance on screen, obviously the speed. You can see there, 25 mile per hour is the maximum speed limit that's being recommended there. The faster you go, the more difficult it is to come to a stop. We've seen that on the previous slide with the 70 mile an hour, the 30 mile an hour, okay? So obviously, the slower you're going, the easier it is to stop. And that's why in certain conditions, the first thing that we do is take our foot off that accelerator, increase our separation distance and slow down a little bit. I'm aware that you know all this, folks, yeah? I'm just going over it and putting it back to the forefront of your mind. The last pointer that I can see on that image, if you've not noticed it yet, is the weather conditions, okay? On this image, it looks dry, it looks fine, okay? So the 2-second rule should suffice. If it starts to rain, if visibility gets poor, etc., then you need to adapt the stopping distances. So you can see on screen, I've loaded up the different bullet points there to say the different things that will affect your stopping distances. What I want you to consider, we split the stopping distance between thinking distance and braking distance to make overall stopping distance. Now, if I was to talk about tiredness and stress, so these two right here, tiredness and stress, they have a direct effect on your stopping distances. Now, that's because your thinking distance is impacted upon. Yeah, it affects your thinking distances. It takes you a little bit longer than that 2/3 of a second. And once you put that longer thinking distance with the stopping distance, with the braking distance, the overall stopping distance will increase. So stress, tiredness, that's all about the thinking distance. Yeah. If I'm talking about the road surface, the condition of the vehicle, the gradient, the weather conditions, the load, okay? All those things are to do with the braking distance. So you will still react at the same time because you're alert, you'll react 2/3 of a second, boom, I've reacted, I've touched my brake pedal. But the actual braking distance will increase because of these different criteria. And that's what's going to increase your overall stopping distance. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, just remember, thinking plus braking equals stopping. And stopping must be less than following distances, otherwise you are risking a rear end collision. Okay, that's what you need to take from that, guys. Now you can see on the bottom of page 12 of your Unit 2 workbook, I'm moving on to page 13 as well. We've highlighted other safety measures that are in place to control your speed. I've got them listed on the board here on the screen. And there's also on page 13, it tells you what the different speed limits of different vehicles. So, cars, minibuses, lorries, etc., etc. It'll tell you the different speed limits of them on different roads, which is worth having a little look at just to get it to the forefront of your mind again. Now, what we have here, the safety measures to control speed that are out there. I know that you're well aware of all of these, folks. And what I want you to consider is that, the things on screen, the traffic lights and road signs, road markings, speed cameras, they're put in place in response to incidents and near misses or even accidents. So, for instance, if you're living on a busy high street and they decide to put speed cameras in, it's because there's been near accidents or actual accidents. And over time, when that's happening, they decide to do the risk assessment, they put control measures in place, and that will be the control measure, that will be the deterrent. So I know there's this common belief out there that all these things are there just to make your life difficult, but it's for safety. They underpin safety on our roads, okay? Other things that are there to control our speed and put a measure in, the highway code, legislation, driver education, these are things that we should be aware of. These are where the speed limits are set. This is the training that we need to understand what's going on. And then obviously the last one, all these rules are enforced by the authorities, the police and the traffic officer patrols that are out there. Now, one thing that's worth being aware of, when you're out on the road, yes, the police can enforce speed restrictions, etc. Traffic wardens don't do that. When it says traffic officer patrols, it's not talking about traffic wardens, parking attendants. They're there to enforce parking. Traffic officer patrols and police, these are the people who will pull you roadside or they'll get you with the speed camera as you go past. So, as I've mentioned previously, the work is out there on the taxis and private hire. Your role is to make sure that customer gets from A to B in a safe, comfortable manner in the shortest possible time, really. So, fulfill your role and do what's expected of you, and everyone will be happy. Okay, so final part of this presentation now, you'll be glad to hear. I'm just going to take you through driving style, vehicle efficiency, being economical, and basically to get your attention, I'm going to give you some advice on how you can maximise your earning potential, yet make more money whilst you're out there. Now, obviously, if I was going out in my vehicle as a private hire driver and you knew that I was making more money per shift, or I was turning over more money per week, per month, per quarter, per year even, and we were working the same hours, you'd want to know why that was. And for me, I'm just going to emphasize the point to you again, that you're going to be running your own business. You're not just driving the vehicle, you are running your own business, okay? So if you look at the situation here, you can see in order to reduce costs, you want to save money on fuel, you want to save money on consumables, you want to save money on your service and intervals. So in terms of fuel, there's no reason for you to be driving around with a full tank all the time. It's extra weight in the vehicle. You're going to be using more fuel to carry that extra weight. Simple things like that. Over accelerating, it's going to burn off more fuel. Idling, just leaving your car ticking over when you're waiting for customers and they take 5 or 10 minutes, that's going to burn more fuel, folks. So, you're going to be out there on the road 10, maybe 12 hours a day. You're going to go through a lot of fuel, yeah, maybe £100 a week worth of fuel, even more, depending on the efficiency of your vehicle and the efficiency of you as a driver. The more you can reduce those costs, the better. Yeah, find the petrol stations that have got reasonable prices for the fuel. Yeah, it's worth seeking them out and knowing where they are. That's what I do. Make sure they're getting the best fuel for my money. Don't always go for the cheapest fuel, because the more expensive fuel has the correct cleaning agents in and stuff like that. So you don't always want to be using the cheapest fuel. Every now and then you need to put in some of the expensive stuff to keep your car ticking over nicely. But yeah, you've got to think about what you're putting in there. Consumables, again, if you're not economical, if you're not efficient with your driving style, and if you're not staying on top of maintaining your vehicle, you're going to go through more consumables, oils, brake fluid, things like that, steering fluid, repairs. You're going to be checking your vehicle in more often with the garage for servicing. Okay, these cost money, yeah, and these are all coming out the business, so you want to keep these costs low. Now, as I'm talking about this, I want you to refer to page 13 and page 14 of your workbook, and there's a lot of tips there in terms of being a more economical driver, a more environmentally friendly one. And some of the ones that I can see, switching off your engine, smooth acceleration, making sure we don't do dry steering, which is turning the wheel when the vehicle is not moving. If you're going to use your air conditioning, don't have your windows open. Simple stuff, folks, that are going to cost you money. Yeah, so you need to think about your business and how you're going about it. Okay. So next slide does similar, tells us how to minimize the impact of our driving style on what we're doing. But what we've got is from the previous one where we changed those techniques, you want to have more forward planning, thinking about where you're going. Again, your smooth acceleration, you want to reduce the cost of fuel, get those emissions down. If your vehicle is showing wear and tear, it's being checked in more often and being asked for a compliance test more regularly, you might want to think of investing in a new vehicle, one that's more up to date. Yeah, go from Euro 5 to Euro 6 maybe, which we talk about a little bit later in the qualification. Okay, but basically what this is all about, guys, is if you can adapt your driving style, if you can be more eco-friendly, if you can be more efficient, if you can give the customer that safe, comfortable journey, then you will generate more repeat business, you'll have a happier work environment, you will make more money, your vehicle will last longer, and you will maximize your earning potential. So all good tips. Hopefully you take it on board, hopefully you follow it. Okay, so unit complete. Thank you for your patience. Thanks for bearing with me. A lot of that I had to drag out from when you first learn to drive and theory tests and stuff like that. But it's always useful having it to the forefront of your mind, and it will support you through your assessments. And hopefully you take on board some of the tips to actually maximize your earning potential when you're out there. Bear in mind those seatbelt regulations. Okay, make sure we read over them. Bear in mind your, thinking plus braking equals stopping distances. That should be less than following distances. But what I need you to do now, guys, is go back onto the web link from the link that you were given by us at Antrec, and you'll find that you've got a Unit 2 pre-test assessment, which is an online mock exam, if you like. Log in, have a little go at that. You want to be scoring a minimum of 70% to prove that you're ready to go through to the full assessment. Once you've done that, if you click on the Unit 2 workbook assessment, and you should be able to fill in a couple of activities, offer some answers to questions that we've got, and you'll have to submit that to your tutor, whether that's me or one of the other tutors. You'll have had an email address from us. If you can submit that, we can mark it, we can give you some feedback, we can identify gaps in your knowledge, we can try and plug those gaps, ready for when you come in and you sit your online assessments with us. So yeah, take that on board, guys, and I will see you soon in Unit 3.